I still remember that day vividly. 28 years of family loyalty crashed into my first taste of real success. As a software engineer at one of Boston's biggest tech companies, my $95,000 starting salary felt like a dream come true for an Italian-American kid from a blue-collar neighborhood. That dream shattered when Uncle Frank cleared his throat at our Sunday dinner and explained the family tradition I had somehow missed. I was expected to surrender my entire salary to him as family head. The shock froze me in place. Before I tell you how my entire family turned against me, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever had to choose between your freedom and family traditions. My family immigrated to America from Sicily 2 generations ago. My grandfather Salvatore arrived with nothing but determination during the Great Depression. Back then, pooling resources was not just tradition but survival. Everyone contributed to a communal fund managed by the eldest male. My grandfather started it, my father continued it, and now Uncle Frank oversaw what they called our family economic safety net. Growing up, I watched how this tradition played out. Every month, my older brother Tony would hand over a sealed envelope containing his paycheck to Uncle Frank during Sunday dinner. Tony was 8 years older than me, and I clearly remember his first salary ceremony when he turned 22. The family applauded as if he had accomplished something extraordinary. Uncle Frank gave a speech about responsibility and family bonds that moved my grandmother to tears. As a 14-year-old watching this ritual, I thought it was honorable, something to aspire to. The benefits of this system were occasionally visible. When my cousin Sam needed surgery for a baseball injury and his insurance denied coverage, the family fund paid the $17,000 hospital bill. When my grandmother needed a down payment for a small condo after my grandfather died, the money appeared without question. These moments reinforced the idea that our tradition was noble and protective, but glimpses of discord existed if you knew where to look. I noticed how my father would sometimes stare at his drink after handing over his envelope, a momentary flash of regret crossing his face before he forced a smile. I saw how my mother would carefully budget household expenses down to the last penny, always anxiously waiting for the monthly stipend Uncle Frank would allocate back to each household. These observations planted seeds of doubt that would take years to fully bloom. My acceptance to MIT on a full scholarship was my first taste of independence. The day my acceptance letter arrived, my parents were proud but strangely quiet. Now I understand why. College exposed me to different cultures and perspectives. My roommate Jake managed his own finances, made his own decisions about money, and seemed bewildered when I explained our family tradition. During sophomore year, I met Allison in my advanced programming class. Smart, independent, and passionate about technology ethics, she challenged my thinking in every way. When I tried explaining my family tradition over coffee one evening, she put down her cup and looked at me with genuine confusion. "What exactly happens to the money?" she asked. I stammered through an explanation about family allocation and collective needs. "And who decides who gets what?" Uncle Frank and the older members, I answered. "Do you get a vote?" The question had never occurred to me. No, I did not get a vote. Nobody under 40 did. Our relationship progressed, and with each passing year at MIT, my perspective shifted. I saw my classmates accepting internships, planning investments, mapping out their futures with financial autonomy I had never considered possible for myself. These experiences created a growing conflict between my loyalty to family tradition and my desire for self-determination. When graduation approached, I applied to dozens of tech companies across the country. Part of me hoped distance might solve my dilemma. The offer from Boston Digital Solutions came with an impressive salary and excellent benefits. For a brief, glorious week, I felt pure joy planning what this income could mean: an apartment in a good neighborhood, paying off student loans, maybe even investing early for retirement. I called my parents to share the good news. My father congratulated me warmly, but when I mentioned the salary figure, his tone subtly shifted. My mother quickly suggested a family dinner to celebrate. That Sunday at Uncle Frank's house, surrounded by aunts, uncles, and cousins, I initially basked in their pride. Then came the toast. To Joshua, Uncle Frank said, raising his glass of homemade wine, who joins our proud tradition of family providers. We look forward to welcoming you officially at the end of your first month." The room spun slightly as I processed his words. Of course, they expected my participation. Why had I fooled myself into thinking it might be different for me? The realization that my family viewed me primarily as a new revenue stream felt like betrayal. Their proud smiles suddenly seemed predatory. The pasta in my mouth turned to ash. In that moment, something inside me made a decision before my conscious mind caught up. I would not surrender my independence without a fight. The pressure began immediately. My mother called daily, casually mentioning how excited Uncle Frank was about my contribution. Various cousins suddenly wanted to meet for coffee, each conversation eventually steering toward the importance of family loyalty. My Aunt Maria texted links to articles about ungrateful children. The subtle became overt when my father unexpectedly appeared at my office building one Tuesday afternoon. "Joshua, we need to talk," he said, standing awkwardly in the modern glass lobby that contrasted sharply with his worn work jacket. Several colleagues passed by, glancing curiously at us. "Dad, I am at work," I whispered, embarrassed and cornered. "This is important. Uncle Frank is concerned you are getting cold feet. Can we discuss this later?" His expression hardened. "Without our family, you would not have today. Who paid for your school clothes? Who drove you to those computer classes you loved so much?" His voice rose slightly. "Who supported you while you studied instead of working? My scholarship paid for college," I reminded him quietly. And before that, his eyes narrowed. "We all sacrifice, Joshua. Tony has contributed for 8 years. What makes you think you are special?" Each interaction followed the same pattern: appeals to guilt, tradition, and family honor. Uncle Frank called to remind me my cousin Lucy needed tuition money for community college. Aunt Sophia mentioned how my grandfather would be ashamed of my hesitation. The message was clear: this was not about money, but about loyalty and respect. Not everyone pressured me. Allison encouraged my growing resistance, helping me see the manipulation underlying their appeals. My friend Michael from work was shocked when I explained the situation. "Dude, that is crazy," he said over lunch. "They cannot legally make you hand over your salary. That is financial abuse." My boss Patrick noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay. When I vaguely mentioned family pressure, he shared his own experience breaking away from controlling parents. These supportive voices strengthened my resolve, but the family pressure only intensified in response. The threats began subtly. Uncle Frank mentioned consequences for those who abandon family obligations. My grandmother called crying, saying my decision was breaking her heart. Tony warned me during a rare private conversation. "You do not know what you are facing, little brother," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Just go along with it. Fighting only makes it worse." When emotional manipulation failed, they escalated. Uncle Frank suggested he might need to tell Allison about certain embarrassing incidents from my teenage years, most of which were exaggerated or completely fabricated. Anonymous calls to my apartment increased. Someone even contacted human resources at my company with false claims about my work ethic. The constant stress took its toll. I began having trouble sleeping, waking in panic at 3 a.m., wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. My work suffered. I missed an important deadline that put my team behind schedule. My relationship with Allison grew strained as I became increasingly anxious and withdrawn. After a particularly threatening call from my cousin Marco, I made a decision to temporarily cut contact. I stopped answering family calls and avoided our neighborhood entirely. This brief respite allowed me to think clearly for the first time in weeks. With Allison's support, I developed boundaries I never knew I needed and prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. The breaking point arrived disguised as reconciliation. My mother texted saying they respected my space and wanted to talk calmly over Sunday dinner at Uncle Frank's house. Wanting to believe in the possibility of understanding, I agreed. It was a mistake I should have anticipated. Walking into Uncle Frank's house that Sunday, I immediately sensed the trap. Instead of the immediate family gathering, I expected over 20 relatives filled the living room and dining area. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even family friends sat in somber judgment. Uncle Frank sat at the head of the dining table like a patriarch presiding over a trial. "Joshua," he said, gesturing to an empty chair directly across from him, "we need to talk about your obligations." I remained standing. "I thought this was a family dinner." "This is family business," my father said from his position at Uncle Frank's right hand. "Sit down." The next hour became a coordinated attack. One by one, relatives recounted all the family had supposedly done for me. Uncle Frank produced a ledger detailing expenses from my childhood school supplies, doctor visits, birthday presents, all meticulously recorded as debts rather than gifts of love. "We supported your computer classes," my Aunt Sophia declared. "We celebrated every academic achievement," added my Uncle Dominic. "We chose you for college while others worked," my cousin Anthony said bitterly. Each statement landed like an accusation. The subtext was clear: I was ungrateful, selfish, betraying the very people who had given me everything. As the testimonials continued, the emotional temperature in the room rose. "You think you are better than us now," Uncle Frank finally demanded. "Too good for family now that you have your fancy degree and big salary." His words hung in the air as my mother began crying softly. My father stared at the table, unwilling to meet my eyes. The disappointment in the room was palpable. That is when something inside me broke free. A clarity I had never experienced before washed over me, and I stood up straight. "I would like to speak now," I said firmly. "I have listened to everyone. Now you will listen to me." The room fell silent in surprise. No one had expected resistance in this carefully orchestrated intervention. "I love this family," I began. "I appreciate everything you have done for me. But this tradition is not about family support. It is about control." Gasps and mutters filled the room, but I continued. "If this system was truly about helping each other, then everyone would have a voice in how the money is used. Everyone would have transparency about where it goes. Instead, we have one person making all decisions while the rest of us simply comply." I turned to face Uncle Frank directly. "You talk about family needs, but I have questions. How much of the family fund went to buy your new car? How much went to renovate your vacation property that only you use? How much goes back to those who contribute versus those who do not?" Uncle Frank's face flushed deep red. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling dishes and glasses. "How dare you question me? This system worked for generations. Because people were too afraid to stand up to it," I replied. "I will not surrender my independence and financial future to a system where I have no voice and no rights." The room exploded. Uncle Frank lunged around the table toward me, only stopped by my cousins Joe and Marco grabbing his arms. My Aunt Maria threw her glass of water in my direction. Chairs scraped across the floor as people jumped up shouting accusations. "Traitor! Ungrateful brat! You are dead to this family." My cousin Anthony shoved me hard into the wall. A framed family photo crashed to the floor glass, shattering symbolically around my feet. I pushed back just enough to create space and moved toward the door, dodging grasping hands and flying objects. My mother collapsed into dramatic sobs, while my father stood frozen, conflict evident in his expression. Only my brother Tony remained seated, watching with an unreadable expression that I would later understand contained elements of both fear and admiration. I made it to the door despite attempts to physically restrain me. As I stepped outside, Uncle Frank's final threat followed me into the night. "You are finished in this family. We will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." True to his word, the campaign against me began immediately. False rumors spread through our community about drug problems and gambling debts. Someone called my company claiming I had stolen proprietary information. Allison received harassing phone calls describing me as mentally unstable. My social media accounts were compromised with embarrassing posts appearing under my name. It was a coordinated effort to destroy my reputation and force me back into compliance. I refused to be intimidated. First, I changed my phone number and email addresses. Next, I consulted a lawyer who sent formal cease and desist letters to key family members. I installed security cameras at my apartment and documented every instance of harassment. I spoke honestly with my boss Patrick about the situation, who responded with unexpected support and even offered to help with security measures at work. The most difficult step was drafting the email I sent to every family member. It stated clearly that I would pursue legal action against anyone who continued the harassment. It formally severed my ties with the family structure while leaving the door open for individual relationships based on mutual respect. Hitting send on that email was both terrifying and liberating, like jumping from a great height, not knowing if water or concrete awaited below. The first weeks of separation brought conflicting emotions. Crushing loneliness arrived unexpectedly during ordinary moments. Grocery shopping on Sunday afternoons when I would normally be at family dinner watching baseball games that I had always shared with my father cooking pasta using my grandmother's recipe. Each instance unleashed waves of grief and self-doubt. Was I overreacting? Was family tradition really worth this pain? Memories of happier times haunted me: summer barbecues where Uncle Frank told entertaining stories, Christmas mornings surrounded by cousins, my father teaching me to change oil in our driveway. These moments of belonging seemed impossibly distant now. Allison became my anchor during this turbulent time. She stayed over many nights when I could not sleep, reassuring me that standing up for myself was not selfish but necessary. She reminded me that real love does not demand submission or control. You are not rejecting your family, she would say. You are rejecting manipulation. There is a difference. Healing began with professional help. My therapist, Lisa, specialized in family trauma and control dynamics. Our weekly sessions helped me understand the psychological foundations of my family's behavior. What you are describing has elements of financial abuse, she explained during our third session. Controlling someone's resources is a powerful way to limit their independence. We explored the generational patterns that had normalized this behavior. My grandfather, an immigrant during desperate times, created a survival mechanism that had outlived its purpose, yet continued because of the power it granted to those in charge. Understanding the system's origins helped me view my family with more compassion without weakening my resolve to remain independent. I began building what I called my chosen family. Michael from work introduced me to his friend group who welcomed me without questions. I joined a support community for people with controlling family backgrounds. These new connections helped fill the void left by my family's absence without replicating its unhealthy dynamics. Professional success became another form of healing. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a promotion recognizing my improved performance once the family stress diminished. The increased salary and responsibility confirmed I had made the right choice, proving I could thrive independently. Then came the unexpected signals of change. My cousin Lucy, the one supposedly needing tuition assistance, contacted me through a friend's social media account. Her message was simple but meaningful. I understand why you did it. I wish I had your courage. 3 months later, my brother Tony called from a number I did not recognize. I should have stood with you, he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. I have wanted out of this system for years, but never had the guts to fight it. The most surprising communication arrived on my birthday, a card from my mother containing only a brief note asking if we could talk sometime. This small gesture represented the first step toward possible reconciliation on new terms. I approached these openings cautiously, establishing clear boundaries from the beginning. Any relationship moving forward would exist without financial entanglement or manipulation. My first meeting with my parents occurred at a neutral coffee shop rather than family property. The conversation was awkward but civilized, focusing on personal updates rather than financial matters. Slowly, individual family members began reaching out, often the youngest ones first. Some older relatives remained committed to shunning me, but even Uncle Frank eventually acknowledged my presence with a stiff nod when we unexpectedly crossed paths at a local deli. The family tradition itself became a topic of whispered reconsideration among the younger generation, inspired partly by my stand and partly by changing economic realities that made such sacrifice increasingly unsustainable. 6 months later, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment for the family members who had shown respect for my boundaries. Seeing my parents, Tony, and 2 cousins gathered around my table representing the beginning of a new, healthier kind of family connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Through this difficult journey, I learned that true love never demands surrender of your autonomy. Healthy boundaries are not selfish, but essential for genuine relationships. Family legacy and tradition should be evaluated and evolved rather than blindly preserved. Sometimes the most painful choice leads to the most necessary growth. I also discovered that freedom carries responsibility. With my financial independence came the opportunity to help family members in ways I chose, freely contributing to my niece's college fund, helping my parents with unexpected medical bills, creating a small business loan for my cousin, starting a food truck. These freely given gifts meant more than any forced contribution ever could. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is not to surrender who you are, but to show them who you can become when you are truly free. And in that freedom, I found something worth more than any tradition, the chance to build a life where love does not come with a price tag. If you have ever had to stand up against harmful family traditions or set difficult boundaries with loved ones, share your experience in the comments below. Has anyone else faced financial control from family members? How did you handle it? Remember to subscribe to hear more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and hit the like button if this resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say no to what hurts you, even when it comes from those you love.